Alright, and welcome to Dividing Quadratic Polynomials. Now, more broadly, what we're going to learn today is polynomial division, but we're going to start in a very, very simple sense with quadratics. Now, what is polynomial division? Well, think about this. Remember back to grade school, whenever you had maybe like the number 936, and you were going to divide by 7. Well, you would say like, okay, how many times does 7 go into 9? It goes in 1 times. 1 times 7 is 7. You subtract and you see, oh, the leftovers are 2. Not, okay, you drop the 3 and you repeat the process. You say, well, how many times does 7 go into 23? It goes in 3 times. 3 times 7 is 21. 23 minus 21 is 2, and we drop the 6. How many times does 7 go into 26? Well, still 3, so 3 times 7 is 21. We subtract it. We have a remainder of 5. So we have a remainder of 5, or you could say a remainder of 5 sevenths, however you really want to denote that. Okay, so we're actually going to take that, and we're now going to apply this idea of long division. We're going to apply it to polynomials. So we're also going to take what is being divided, and we're going to first put it into our long division box. X squared plus 5x plus 6 will be divided by x plus 2. So I kind of want to give you like a way to, I want to give you a system here. So let's just say this one. Let's say step one, we're going to rewrite. Okay, what is step 2? Well, step 2 is we're going to divide our leading coefficients. And I'll abbreviate coefficients, just coef, for coefficients. So what do I mean by divide my leading coefficients? Well, my leading coefficient here, let's do this in a different color, is x squared, and my leading coefficient here is x, and so we'll do x squared divided by x. Now remember, this is really x to the 1, and when you divide variables, you actually subtract the exponents. So 2 minus 1 leaves us x to the 1. So our very first thing that we'll put is going to be x. Now remember, when we do this, we then multiply x times x, and I think I'll do a different color here. We'll do x times x, which will give us x squared. But we're actually going to multiply this, we're going to multiply by the x, and we're going to multiply by the 2. And x times 2 is plus 2x. So let's say this, step 3, we're going to multiply and subtract. Okay, so we're going to multiply by this, almost this little mini quotient that we found. We multiply it times x is x squared, x times 2 is 2x, and then I said we're going to subtract. We are then going to take this away from the expression above it. Now, this is the one step that really confuses students. This negative has to distribute with both of these, so what I like to do is I like to change this from a positive to a negative, and change this from a positive to a negative, and once I distribute it, I change that to a plus sign. Okay, so x squared minus x squared is 0, and this tells us that we're doing the problem right so far. 5x minus 2x is 3x. I bring down the 6. Okay, so let's say this. So for step 4, we will bring down our next term, and then these 4 steps that we just did, we then repeat. So switching back to this red, we take our leading term, that's 3x, we take that leading term, that's x, we do 3x divided by x. Here we know that our x's cancel, and we're left over with 3. So I write plus 3 since it's positive, and let's repeat the process. So we have divided the leading coefficient. Now we're going to multiply and subtract. So 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 2 is 6. And remember, we're going to subtract that. Well, I distribute this negative. A negative times a positive is a negative, and a negative times a positive is a negative, and then that changes to a plus. So 3x minus 3x is 0, 6 minus 6 is 0, and we see that there are no leftovers. So we would say this: x squared plus 5x plus 6 divided by x plus 2 gives us x plus 3. And that should make sense. It is a factor of x squared plus 5x plus 6. Okay, let's go ahead and look at an example where it does not divide so evenly. Okay, let's take a look at this. Here we have 4x squared minus 3x plus 8 is divided by x minus 3. Well, remember, let's do step 1. We're going to rewrite. Okay, and so we'll write our very first thing, the dividend, 4x squared minus 3x plus 8. And on the outside, we'll write our divisor, x minus 3. And remember, step number 2 is we are going to divide our leading coefficients. I'll just kind of abbreviate these. And let's do this in red. So here I have 4x squared divided by x. And look, 4 divided by 1 will still be 4, but x squared divided by x is x. And so I write 4x right up top. Now remember, on our very next step, number 3, we want to multiply and subtract. So I multiply this 4x times x, which gives me 4x squared, and I multiply 4x times negative 3, which gives me negative 12x. Now remember, that's the multiplying part, and now we have to subtract. Well, this negative makes this positive into a negative, and this negative makes this negative into a positive, and once I distribute that negative, I'll change it to a plus sign. And we have 4x squared minus 4x squared, which is 0. And remember, every time you get a 0 from subtracting these leading coefficients, that's telling you that you're doing the problem correctly. Now here I have negative 3x plus 12x, which will be 9x. And I drop that plus 8. And once we do this, remember that was step 4, drop next term. Well, now we're just going to repeat steps 2 through 4 again. So I go back to my red, I said, and we'll take our new leading coefficient, 9x. We'll divide it by our leading coefficient of the divisor, which is x, and x divided by x is 9. So I go up here and I put plus 9. That's the next thing that pops out. Now from here, remember, step 3, we want to multiply and subtract. I do 9 times x. Let's switch back here to orange. You know, let's put this in a different color just so you know. So 9 times x is 9x, and I do 9 times negative 3, which is negative 27. And remember, after I multiply, I now have to subtract that entire expression. Well, this negative converts this positive 9x into a negative 9x, and it changes this negative 27 to a positive 27. And once I've distributed this negative, it becomes a positive. Pardon me. Now from here, you have 9x minus 9x, which is 0, and you have 8 plus 27, which will be, let's see, 8 plus 27 will be 35. And notice there's nothing here to drop down any further. So what do we say? We say this. We say that we have now a remainder of 35 over our original divisor, which is x minus 3. And so that's the answer there. All right, 4x plus 9 with a remainder of 35 over x minus 3. Well, let's go ahead and do another example. Okay, now let's go ahead and take example 3, where we have x squared minus 2x plus 6, and this will be divided by 2x plus 4. And notice I'm asking a different question here. I ask, is 2x plus 4 a factor? Let's find out. So we know that step 1, we want to rewrite. And so we can go ahead and rewrite this as our division box, where our dividend goes inside, 8x squared minus 2x plus 6, and our divisor, 2x plus 4, goes on the outside. And let's see, step number 2, we want to divide our leading coefficients. Okay, so let's do that back in red. And I know that my first leading coefficient is 8x squared divided by 2x. Now notice something here, we actually have numbers to divide. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and x squared divided by x is x. So at top, I write 4x. Now let's go on to our third step. We know that we're going to, I'm just going to put the multiplication symbol. So we will multiply and subtract. And so what does that look like when we do this? I'll do this in orange. So 4x times 2x is 8x squared. And you should notice a pattern here. Whenever we multiply this term by our leading term here, we get the original leading term. Yes, that should totally make sense, because that's how we got the first term, is by dividing it from that original leading term. Now we have 4x times 4, so plus 16x. And remember, now we have to subtract that. Well, once I distribute this to that, the positive 8x squared becomes a negative 8x squared, and the positive 16 becomes a negative 16. And once I distribute that negative, I'll change it to a positive. Now 8x squared plus negative 8x squared is 0, means we're doing everything right so far. And negative 2x plus negative 16 is negative 18. Oh, by the way, that should be in x right there. My apologies, guys. 4x times 4 is 16x. So negative 2x minus 16x is negative 18x. Now, remember, for our very next step, why don't I even put this in purple, we will drop our next term. So I drop this plus 6. Okay, guys, and remember, at this point, we now repeat steps 2 through 3. My new leading term is this negative 18x. My original leading term there is 2x. And negative 18 divided by 2 will be negative 9. And x divided by x is just, well, they cancel. So I'll write 4x minus 9. Now from here, let's go back to our step number 3. I want to do this in purple now. And now we will multiply and subtract. So negative 9 times 2x is negative 18x. Negative 9 times 4 is negative 36. And at this point, remember, I'm now going to subtract that entire expression. So a negative times a negative is a positive. A negative times a negative is a positive. And I now, once I've distributed it through, I'll make that a positive. So negative 18x plus 18x is 0. And 6 plus 36 is 42. And notice we have a remainder of 42 over 2x plus 4. So this is what I would say, guys, and this is really, really key to the whole problem. If there is a remainder, then it is not a factor. And I'll say that one more time. If there is a remainder, then it is not a factor. So is 2x plus 4 a factor? The answer is no. All right. Well, guys, I hope that these 3 examples helped. However, I know this is such a confusing topic when you first learn it. I'm going to do one more example, and in this one, I guarantee you it will be a factor. Now let's move on to our final example. Okay, here we have x squared plus 6x plus 9, and we're going to divide out x plus 3. So step number 1, we know that we will rewrite. So I can write x squared plus 6x plus 9. And on the outside I can write x plus 3. I start by dividing my leading coefficients. So I know x squared divided by x is equal to x. And I put x right there. Now from there I know that I want to multiply that. X times x is x squared. X times 3 is 3x. And I am going to wind up subtracting that. And so this negative distributes to make this into a negative and that into a negative. And once I distribute it, I essentially make it go away by turning it into a positive. Now x squared plus negative x squared is 0. We're on the right track. And 6x plus negative 3x is 3x. I drop my final term plus 9. And now we repeat the process. See how easy this is once you get the hang of it? Now from here, let's go back to red. And we say that our leading term now is 3x divided by our original leading term there, x. And 3x divided by x is simply 3. So I put plus 3. Now let's switch to a different color here. I know that 3 times x is 3x. I know that 3 times 3 is 9. And when I go to subtract that whole thing, well, this negative makes the 3 a negative and the 9 a negative. And 3x minus 3x is 0, and 9 minus 9 is 0. And check it out. When there is no remainder, then our divisor is a factor. And man, I hope I'm getting the terms divisor and dividend correct. Okay, when there is no remainder, our divisor is a factor. Okay, guys, I'll see y'all in our next video.